Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Ally's Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. And it's a questions episode this week. We'll try and get through as many as we can. And there's quite a range of questions as well coming up, starting with this one from Richard Bowes, who says, do record labels pay radio stations to play tracks, as it forms a key part of album promotion? Which, I mean, I hope you're not suggesting that there's still an element of payola in the radio game, that the careful placement of a brown envelope will guarantee an artist a place on a DJ's playlist. Heaven forbid. The answer, obviously, officially is no. Labels don't pay radio stations to play tracks. Although the reason for my slightly flippant response is that back in the old days, yes, they did, or at least they tried to. It was the curse of pop music, especially in America. You can look this up, but I think the first big payola scandal involved the famous American DJ Alan Freed, and there was a massive hoo-ha about this in the late 50s, early 60s, where there was obviously there was a big investigation into payola that was going on at the time, where record labels or their go-betweens were approaching DJs and yet actually paying them or trying to pay them cash to play their records without obviously making these payments public. And then there was more payola scandals in the 70s and 80s. More recently, I think the most recent one that I could find, which prompted another big investigation in America, revealed how Sony BMG had allegedly, I should say, been paying for radio plays in the States for artists. And they included the list in the investigation. The judge named Good Charlotte, Jennifer Lopez, and bizarrely, Franz Ferdinand. You can look this up. If you type NPR, Payola, The Beat Goes On, into your search engine, you can find more details there, Richard. But these days, there are, shall we say, more subtle ways of trying to put your records on the radar of radio stations now. So the major labels, most of the big indie labels, they'll all have in-house radio promotions teams, often known as pluggers, radio pluggers, and they will contact radio stations about their latest releases. Or alternatively, there's numerous independent radio promotions teams now who are employed on an act-by-act basis, again, to just try and make the case for their artists to be played on the radio, the artists that they're representing. I mean, I've said this before, I could do a whole episode on radio plugging if anyone was interested. Things like, radio promo teams, they might take an influential producer out to lunch occasionally, but it's nothing like the old days. Even when I joined Radio 1 in the 90s, all kinds of freebies being thrown around in an effort to promote new acts. But it's all kind of changed now. I don't know if you've come across any stories, any payola gossip, Stuart?
No, well, no matter how much money I offer you every week, you still won't open your Six Music show with a Black Rose. So I think you're an upstanding example of
can't be bought, mate.
I don't know how much I'd have to pay you for that. I think it'd be out of my budget. But yeah, but there is something I want to talk about, which is a related thing in streaming, where the payola word's been used in the streaming world in recent years, and it concerns this feature that Spotify has called Discovery Mode, which is a thing where, as an artist or label, you can say, right, I'd like to promote this track, please. And Spotify will put it in its radio mode and its auto mixes and its autoplay mode. So if you reach the end of an album or playlist on Spotify and you have autoplay switched on, it will play you similar stuff. It will carry on playing. Mm-hmm. And so you can, as an artist, can say, I want my track to be promoted in those places to people who like stuff that sounds like me. But in return, you accept a lower royalty rate. So you get paid lower royalties for those plays than other ones.
Okay.
And a lot of the discussion around this, there's been a lot of discussion in America, and some independent bodies have criticized it, saying, isn't this kind of payola by the name? We're essentially paying to have our stuff played to people on Spotify, whereas Spotify always argued it's just a marketing tool that independent artists in particular can benefit from. But that seems interesting. So in a way, you say, like, payola has been not part of the radio industry for a long time. But in streaming, that word had a revival of people saying, is this new way of doing things where you take a lower royalty rate in exchange for your track being played to people? So it's still, the idea is still kind of bubbling around. Like, where's the line between paying for plays and not? And obviously in streaming, if anyone tells you we will pay us £1,000 and we'll get you 1 million Spotify plays. That's a bogus service. Like those are kind of bots, and that's illegal, and you'll get in trouble for it. But
Right.
yeah.
Similarly, I suppose, to your streaming point. There is still some financial investment in radio from record labels, but it's things like, for instance, if a radio station comes along and says we can put your band or your artist on at one of our gigs, because it would be great exposure for your artists. But then they'll say, but we can't really afford to pay them the going rates, or we can't pay them at all. So the record label might then pick up part of the tab for their artist appearing on a big event as staged by a radio station, or otherwise the artist had to foot the bill themselves, really. But if a label really wanted exposure for the group, they may contribute to that. I don't know. There will be industry people listening to this who may have more anecdotal evidence of labels attempting, subtly or not, to influence a radio station. But the answer to your question is it's not an accepted method of how radio works. I think that's
a good way of putting it.
Yeah. Question from Chris Gilbert. How does the PRS music license levy that pubs and bars and other venues pay, how does it get distributed? Surely it's impossible to know which individual tracks are being played in said pubs and bars. Do you want to take this one?
Thank you for that hospital pass. I'll do the licensing. So I was actually I spent happy few minutes on the PPL PRS site looking at the license. And so you can get a license that covers every music in your pub or bar. So your sound system, also a jukebox, also live performances and karaoke. And to start with how the money gets paid, it depends on what you're doing. So if you have a jukebox, it depends on how many square meters it can be heard in. So it's based on the space you're playing it to. And you pay a certain amount per year. For live music performances, based on how many attendees you have, and you pay about 14 pence per attendee up to 100. But there's all these kind of variables to calculate how much you pay. In terms of how it gets distributed, so some bigger businesses do supply lists of tracks. This is what got played here. This is what played in this gig. This is what got played on our sound system. And then those can be reviewed against data to calculate, right, well, these songwriters get this payout and these get those. But when it's like smaller businesses, and I think a lot of pubs and bars would come under small businesses, really. There's a variety of methods, like PRS and PPL say they look at what songs have been licensed, so they know which songs have been available to play in those places, so they can kind of look at that. They do market surveys, quote, in relation to the types of music used by different types of customers. So they try and figure out, well, we don't have the exact data, but we can figure out what might have been played based on who goes to this pub. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of kind of finger in the air calculations. Some of it might be based on market share too. These artists have this share of overall listenings elsewhere, so we'll assume it's the same. But the interesting thing I wanted to talk about actually is there are some tech startups who are trying to help make this more accurate and better. So there's one called Ordo, and they've got like a device that you install in your pub or restaurant, and it basically Shazam. Well, it doesn't Shazam everything because that's trademark, but Shazam the app to identify music. It's that equivalent, and it identifies everything being played and then just transmits that back to whichever collecting societies are signed up as a partner, so they can get the data in exactly how many plays. There's another new one called Volu, which has an app that does this. So there is tech coming along, which is like, actually, there's a lot of unknown data out there that we kind of haven't just basically calculate ourselves. But if we have devices listening in those places, we can then say, yeah, we know exactly what was played, which is really good. If you say it's a metal pub, or say it's a pub that has a jukebox purely of half man, half biscuit songs, or like some of the joys of pubs are where they have a real music policy that's very specific.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't match the popularity of those artists or that genre in the wider world, then they might not get the fair royalties for those plays in that place. So there is technology coming along that will make it more accurate and have exactly what was played. But for now, I think it's a mixture of sometimes they get reports and other times it's kind of we get this money from them, we'll try and figure out what might have been played and we'll share it out accordingly, which is a kind of it's not back of the envelope. There's science behind it. They try very hard to figure it out. But I think technology will hopefully help with this.
Ian McKinnon says, you mentioned recently that Noel Gallagher will be getting his publishing back in 2025. Does this mean Noel hasn't been making anything from publishing in the last 30 years? Or has he been getting just a percentage while the publisher takes the rest of it? Does a publishing deal also mean that the writer has no control over what their songs are used to promote? There's a few questions here which we'll try and work our way through these for you, Ian. Firstly, well, let's try and untangle Noel's publishing. So the deal that is coming to an end next year is, as I understand it, the Oasis publishing deal, which is with Sony ATV. Meanwhile, I think he also has a separate deal for his solo work or his High Flying Birds work, which, according to the credits on Spotify, the publishing credits on Spotify, that deals with Sour Mash Records. And if you look up Sour Mash Records at Company's House, there are 3 directors of the company, one of whom is Noel Thomas Gallagher. So he has some control over his own songs, and obviously will be involved in collecting the money for his own music. But in answer to your first question, then, Ian, has he had nothing from his publishing over the last 30 years? Oh, no, he has. He has been earning royalties left, right, and centre, because he will get obviously the large percentage of the royalties through this Sony ATV deal, through the fact that he wrote the bulk of the Oasis songs. So he'll be getting publishing royalties for Oasis songs, and also just imagine all the money that his songs would have accrued from radio play over the years as well. And let's not forget, songwriters, they get 50% on this, Stuart. 50% of the payments for radio plays go straight to the artist.
Oh yeah, it was an artist, isn't it? A recording artist. Yeah, but it's weird because that idea of what is a publishing deal. I mean, the publisher owns the rights to the songs, don't they? But Noel Gallagher still gets the royalties. And I was trying to work out what the average publishing deal gives you. I know it's you get a much bigger share of your publishing royalties than an artist gets of their recording royalties. Mm-hmm. And I saw one article saying you get about 80%. The publisher keeps about 20% on average. But it all depends on the deal you signed, doesn't it? And if Noel Gallagher signed or re-signed that deal at a certain point when he had lots of clout, he might be getting a higher percentage. But yeah, he's been getting a lot of his publishing royalties.
And also, as well as radio, famously, Noel will be able to add in the PRS payments for performances of his songs when they've been played live as well, because PRS takes 3% of the ticket price on gigs, and then distributes royalties to the writers of the songs that were performed at that gig, which, as Noel pointed out, means that every time his brother Liam has been out on the road covering old Oasis songs in his set, a percentage of Liam's gig revenue would go straight back to Noel. So all in all, his publishing has been pretty lucrative to date. As to, well, now that there's the question of control, isn't there? And with this, just take yourself back to 2015, Ian, because you might remember, Noel, I'm sure, would have the power of veto over what his songs were used for, or at least some power, I think. But remember 2015, remember what would it have been like if you were Noel Gallagher sitting at home when his management company phoned up and said, Noel, yeah, John Lewis had been on the phone. They want to use a cover version of Half a World Away for their Christmas ad. You up for this? At this point, I think Noel possibly could have said, no, I don't think so.
It's not my brand.
No, but instead, yes, please, my song on a TV ad throughout Christmas. Yeah, I think I'll go back to the living room, put an extra log on the fire. But this though is a question. There have been other cases, haven't there, around artists losing control of the rights to their songs.
Yeah, well, this is it, because the traditional publishing deal, the understanding would be the songwriter would have the right to veto things, because you don't want to have your music used in a cigarettes advert or something that doesn't show you. But yeah, I went back to the 1980s, which is something I often like to do. And I was half remembering a Michael Jackson Beatles story. So I went back and researched that. And yeah, so Michael Jackson famously bought the Beatles publishing rights. And in the 1980s, Paul McCartney actually came out and had a bit of a go at him and said, he's licensing our songs to commercials now, and we didn't want that. That's not something we would do.
Mm.
So that was an early example of, if you don't own your publishing rights, you do lose some of that control. But with a publisher, you would normally expect to be rung up, like you say, and said, so and so wants to do this. Do you say yes or no? And the complication comes, of course, if you have multiple songwriters who've fallen out, which is often the case. And
Yeah.
then one of them says no, one of them says yes, one of them might say no despite the other one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I think in that sense, a publishing deal, they should have control. But in this new world where you can sell your songs to someone like a Hypnosis or an investment company, if I was doing it, you want that deal to include that right of veto still, and you want to carry on working with them, and you want the relationship to be that company bringing you opportunities, and you could say yes or no. But in theory, if you don't have that written into it, you would lose their rights.
This is my question, which I need to find out some more about this. But yes, as you say, traditional publishing deals offered a certain amount of control for the artist. But do the new deals being offered by these new investment companies, like as you say, Hypnotis, will they be giving the artists any power, or by selling your catalogue to them, do you end up forfeiting any say on what happens to your songs, because the company now owns your catalogue and they will want to maximise the use of your songs for the greatest financial return. So I don't 100% know the answer to this, but I
Well,
think I could
also,
probably guess what those deals look like.
I mean, there's a reputational risk for those companies. So say Hypnosis or anyone bought Noel Gallagher's publishing
Hmm.
and then licensed Don't Look Back in Anger to Manchester United to use on all their social media things,
Right.
um, which Noel Gallagher would not be pleased with, obviously, Man United. Other songwriters might look at that and go, hang on a minute, they licensed his thing to a thing he didn't agree with and he made a fuss about it. I'm not going to sell my stuff. So I think for those companies, they can't just go and do commercials willy-nilly, because I think word will get round and songwriters will go, hang on a minute, I want to work with someone who respects my views. So I think that's one of the little bars on this, is that if you buy someone's catalog, do something that they don't approve of, and they complain publicly, you may struggle to sign up some other songwriters as a result. But yeah, I mean, the other thing we should mention is, I think when we talk about Noel Gallagher getting his publishing back, but it doesn't mean that as of next summer, he'll be sat in his home office doing all the work a publisher does for his work. He won't be ringing up people, negotiating deals and that. He'll still need someone to do the administration of his catalogue and publishing. And he might choose to license it. He might choose that to be his existing publisher. He might say,
Mm.
well, Sony, I trust the work you're doing. I own it, but I'll pay you to do the publishing work for me. So
Yeah.
even when someone gains it back, they may still end up working with a publisher, in the same way that we talk about Taylor Swift being signed to Universal, but she owns her rights and she uses them for the stuff she needs doing. The similar can happen in publishing, and I suspect, unless Noel Gallagher fancies sitting down and doing all, going through his books and doing the work of a publisher, which might last a day or two, and then he'll go and find someone to do it for him.
Yeah, Noel Gallagher sat at home on the phone to sync companies, saying, "Would
Yeah,
you like to use my music in your film? I'll write you. I'll write you a theme tune for your telly program, or you can
I
have
take
any
it's
of the
cool.
songs. Any of these songs, you can have them for a tenner."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting new dawn, isn't it? As you say, there will have to be a balance between somebody, and it probably will come in how much the investment companies spend, because if any artist says, well, I'd still want a certain amount of control over what my songs are used for, then they'll say possibly, I mean, this is it's off the top, it's purely speculation, but if I was the investment company, I would then reduce the amount of money I was willing to spend on buying that
Well,
catalogue.
it's a good. I remember when Hypnosis used to put out their annual report, and they'd talk about some of the work they'd done exploiting catalog, in the positive exploitation sense, not the
Mm,
negative sense, in the
mm,
finding ways to make more money. And there were things like, we took this song and we made a sped up version of it and got it on TikTok and made it go viral. Like, there's all this stuff you can do with a catalog, and for some songwriters that would make their teeth grind. You're gonna what? Speed up my song, chop it up, and put it on TikTok. I'm not having that. Whereas other ones would be like, great, show me the money. Oh, that's good. So there is that. I think whether you're selling your rights to a investment company or working publisher, you need to find someone you work with well, who you trust to do the right thing with it, and who you trust to ask your permission. So yeah, I think the relationships have the same core values, but yeah, ultimately, if you sell your stuff to someone, they could turn around and say, we know better, and then you're in trouble.
final question for this episode from Bob Riggles, bass player from the Lancashire Hot Pots. Hello, Bob. I hope all's good with you. I love that Lancashire Hot Pots, me. Bob writes, I've got a question about music videos. With the shift from traditional music channels to platforms like YouTube and TikTok, how has the economics of producing music videos changed? Considering the decline in big budget productions and the rise of user-generated content, how do artists and labels now justify and strategize their investment in music videos? Here's one for you. This is another one for you, Stuart, I think.
Yeah, I got all nostalgic over this because I grew up when MTV was kind of established, and then the box turned up, and you could dial a number to request a video. So I grew up quite excited about music videos, and when something new came out, it was an event, wasn't it? Like I remember, it was like it would be on MTV once an hour. It would be on the chart show. Like videos were important.
Yeah, I guess in a way, I'm obviously from a slightly different generation to you. So MTV almost passed me by when it started, and I never had any satellite TV, so I was never as tuned in to those music channels as I know a lot of people were, because when I was presenting the evening session on Radio 1, you'd constantly have, going back to our friends, the radio pluggers coming in and saying, this is the most requested track on this station and this is on rotation here. Or people would reference music videos to me. I had no idea, no idea what was going on whatsoever, apart from maybe, the odd popular or cult one. But you're right, there were shows like, I do remember the chart show, because that was on proper telly.
My first guitar band I liked was in XS, and the way I discovered them was the chart show did one of their. We played 3 videos from a band back to back, and it was like New Sensation and Need You Tonight, like 2 big ones. And I was like, wow! And it was a video that hit me. I was like, wow, that's a band, and that was my first memory of like going, bands are cool. Because before that, I'd been into kind of mainly pop singers, who are also still cool. But yeah, anyway, so from that rabbit hole, I went down a real rabbit hole here because I was like, the heyday of music videos. And I found there's actually a Wikipedia page for the most expensive music videos ever made.
Is there?
A chart. And I was going to try and make you guess what is the most expensive music video ever made, which you just told me you may not have the context for having not watched MTV.
Yeah. What's that? I mean, it won't be this, but I do remember. Do you remember that? I can't remember which track it was, but that Oasis video where they've got a shed load of helicopters above them. And you go, how much is each of those helicopters costing? I think that's when you suddenly thought, hang on a second, this is getting out of hand now, because all this video budget is recuperable. This is all coming out of your of your pay, lads. You do realise this, don't you? Helicopters everywhere. I don't know. Is it? Well, give us a clue. What sort of era is it? Is it 80s or 90s?
Okay, we're talking mid 90s.
Mid 90s. So it'll be a big pop or rock act from the mid 90s.
Yeah. It's a duet, actually. It's a family duet. There you go. That's quite a good clue.
It's a family duet.
A family duet.
Oh, go on. Put me out of my misery. What is it?
Okay. It's Michael and Janet Jackson's Scream. Apparently $7 million, which adjusted for today is just under $14 million today's.
Wow.
But I remember that video. It was like I think at the time it was like, this is the most expensive music video, was part of the kind of almost the promotion for it. But the interesting thing is this chart, it goes down to like the 80s, but it's a lot of videos from the 90s and the early 2000s, and that is of the heyday of big budget music videos. Like the top 10 is like, it's 3 Madonna videos, 2 more Michael Jackson videos, Aqua's Cartoon Heroes, and Limp Bizkit's Rollin', which I'm sorry to put that back in your head. But the interesting thing about this, and this is where it brings back to this, there's actually one video from this year in that top 10, and it's Coldplay's Feels Like I'm Falling in Love.
Really?
Which according to this chart, and this is where Wikipedia, the ultimate citation needed caveat. So this chart reckons that this video cost $3.5 million. Right. And that is sourced from a random Greek newspaper report on the shooting of the bid. Which went, they spent €3 million on it. It's not like that appears to be the thing, but basically they filmed it in front of the Acropolis, and that might be where the costs come in,
Right.
Okay.
So you can.
So
go on.
So you can still splash a lot of money on a music video, but I think Bob is right in that that is now almost the exception rather than the rule. And the focus for a lot of artists now is on short video, social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And it's not, can we get on MTV once an hour? It's, can we go viral on TikTok? And that's kind of what's underpinning a lot of it nowadays.
Mm. So I think it's partly this plays into the narrative which has been developing on these podcasts of late, where the music industry is constantly evolving, isn't it? And there's a redistribution of staff and money. So the old-fashioned marketing departments who would, yes, stake all their money on during the 90s, if it was a dance record, a remix and a video, and now having to think, right, where is this money better spent, and how are we going to get across to the audience which is in front of us? So and there just aren't any, just aren't the places, are there, on TV, particularly for a massive video, which is a shame in a way, because it was, as part of a statement of what an artist was about, a strong visual
Yeah.
statement of this band and what they how they interpreted the song which they just released. I mean, all the
And we
things,
talked also.
like, it's the same as moving away from all the money that used to be spent on record sleeves, which now you spend a lot of money on a record sleeve, but it's probably only going to be about 5 millimeters big on next to the track's presence on Spotify. But
Yeah, and
yes,
we talked about Beyonce, didn't we, recently? Beyonce's sworn off music videos for her last two albums and saying concentrate on the audio. I mean, it did make me think though, like, yeah, because marketing budgets are tight, marketing teams are stretched. It's difficult to do that kind of big thing. But so instead of doing 3 big budget music videos around an hour, or even 3 mid budget, you're probably better off paying for someone to travel around with you and just be shooting video all the time that you can put on TikTok and Instagram and wherever. Like, I interviewed someone from TikTok recently, and she was talking about what they've done with artists. And she was talking about Niall Horan of One Direction. Apparently, he has a team member go into the crowd before concerts, and he gets fans to ask him questions. And then he records the answers, and they edit that into video and put it on TikTok. So that idea of having someone around you who goes out and films just like impromptu bits of video,
yeah,
which the nice thing about that is that's kind of scalable, in that if you're Niall from One Direction, you've got a team and you can send one of them out saying, get some video content, don't come back until you've got at least 7 TikToks. But if you're a band, it's your mate who's selling t-shirts. You can say, actually, could you shoot some video? Could you shoot a video of us mucking about backstage, shoot some video of fans, shoot some stuff? So I think that is the trend. It's like little content all the time rather than these big one-off things. And also you've got like the streaming services quite like video, but what they want is short video clips. So for example, Spotify, I mean, have you ever used Spotify where when you're playing a song, it has these looping videos that go on the screen?
Yeah.
They're called Canvas. And that's something that there's data showing if you have one of those, people do listen, they don't skip so much. So that's one thing as an artist you expect to do, produce these Canvas videos on Spotify. YouTube has its own short. So I think it's not just that you can do other stuff, it's that you're expected to have a lot of short video content. And if you're deciding where to put your budget, that probably is the place. But I don't know. I think every trend is worth bucking as well. Like if you're an artist and you have, especially if you have mates who are clever at videography, design, even AI, and we talk about AI a lot, you can do some really fun things with AI video and images now. And a few bands have done videos that were entirely AI generated. So I think whenever something seems like it's gone down in importance, someone can then make a really exciting music video and everyone gets excited again and goes, right, we should make music videos. So I think it will come around a bit more. But yeah.
There you go, Bob. Don't let us stop you making a big budget Lancashire Hot Pots video for the festive season, maybe, yeah, or the next time you're on tour. That's where we'll leave it for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, do please subscribe in your podcast app and give us a review and a rating, which, to be blunt, helps our profile online. We'd be very grateful. Alternatively, you can support the show by becoming a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. Just go to patreon.com/thepriceofmusic to find out more. And thank you also to everyone who's already signed up to our Patreon page. We are looking at ways of rewarding you for your kind contributions, which may yet include the much threatened Price of Music pop quiz. Watch this space. And thanks to everyone who sent in a question. If we didn't get round to yours today, we'll get to it sooner or later. But if you have something that you've not asked yet, something that's been bugging you about the music industry, which you'd like us to try and clear up for you, send us your queries to thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. That's it for now. Take care, everybody. Cheerio.